Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Welcome to Stillman and Company of the 440 Sports Network, presented, of course, by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. You know those guys. They've been with me since day one. They are the best. And we have a loaded show today. No Titans practice today to get into, but man, I did a pod today. And on the pod, I did it with Charm Sports. Charm Sports is kind of like a Twitter account that, kind of aggregates a lot of Titans stuff and breaks down, it has a lot of Titans takes and whatnot. And I've seen Charm Sports around, and Charm Sports has crapped on me plenty of times. And yesterday, after the Robert Saleh press conference, he sent out a tweet and said, I would just love to know what Jared Stillman is thinking when he asks these questions. So I replied and I said, fine, I'll do your podcast. Keep it at 45 minutes, because after 45 minutes, I start to kind of get bored and get distracted. I said, keep it to 45 minutes and I'll do your podcast, and I'll answer any question you may have about the questions that I ask at the press conference. We actually ended up talking and debating and everything else for like an hour and a half. And I actually really enjoyed it. And it's up on his Twitter account. I'll retweet it later today after the show. But I want to start with the theme of what that pod was about and what it feels like Titan fans have just been bitching about. That'll be our first topic. Our second topic, 1 year ago today. In fact, about 1 year ago today, and give or take an hour, I was in the office at 1025 for the last time. And now that we have a year in review, we'll go over that. Plus headlines on Baker Mayfield, the Dallas Cowboys, and Tony Romo. And yes, I will leave time today to answer some of your questions, to get to some of your comments, things that I haven't done a ton of so far this week with all the practice stuff and the press conferences and everything else going. But first, I do want to tell you about our presenting sponsor, which is Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I love Hiller. They take great care of my home. They can do the exact same for you. Hiller, what I love is they have true transparency pricing. What that means is, let's say you need your HVAC fixed. Their technician will come out. He will go into the HVAC, figure out what needs to be done, and then he will sit down with you and he will line item everything for you on the front end. So they'll tell you, yeah, this is going to be $400, and it's going to be $400 because this is $100, this is $200, this is $100, boom, $400. Not, yes, ma'am, we'll fix the problem. That'll be $8,000. That's not how they operate. And that's why I love Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Honest. They take great care of my home. I've had a home since 2018. They've taken great care of it. They could do the exact same for you. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. My guys, the presenting sponsor of this program, proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. That's Hiller. Call the Happy Face Truck today. Okay, so I did the Charm Sports podcast today. And again, the reason I did it is because he said, I would love to know what goes through Jared's head when he asks the questions in the press conference that he's asked. And maybe it's just my algorithm. Maybe it's just my lack of self-awareness. Maybe an elevated sense of importance. I don't know. But for some reason, I feel like the first 2 days of Titans practice, all I hear is Titan fans moaning and complaining and bitching. And it's about me. And again, it's about 3 questions I've asked in 2 separate press conferences. The first 2 were the Cam Ward, where I asked Cam, he said his rookie season was all right in his Netflix documentary. How would he define all right, given the fact that he had the lowest QBR in the NFL last year? They were 3-14. And then going back to the we ask comments, which Cam stands on, and then he said he was all right. Well, hold on. Wait a minute. What's that mean? And then with Robert Saleh yesterday, at the very end of the press conference, after I'd asked two other questions and everybody else had asked their questions, the last question I asked him about Fireman Ed, the Jet superfan who said, Saleh's saying they're going to kick our ass. And yet, for some reason, Titans Twitter so fucking up in arms about press conference questions. And I'm like, what the hell do you people want? And that's where I want to start today. There's no practice today for the Titans, which honestly I'm pretty grateful for because I probably wouldn't have been able to go to it anyways. But there's no practice today for the Titans. They have a closed walkthrough. What that makes me think is it makes me think Robert Saleh was happy with the intensity at the first two practices, which I thought were fine. They probably have a walkthrough installing stuff today. They'll probably have a more intense practice tomorrow, which would be Saturday. They'll take off Sunday, and they'll put the pads on Monday. If I had to guess, that's what I would say is probably going to happen, which I'm excited for because I like pads and I like high-intensity practices. So I'm here for all of this. But when it comes to what people want out of me, I have to ask, what do you want? And when I did the podcast with Sharm earlier today, that's what I kept asking. And he was like, well, do you still think Cam Ward's a bust because you said in OTAs Cam Ward was a bust? And I said, well, I do think Cam Ward's going to be a bust. And I think a lot of that is more the Titans' fault than it is Cam Ward's fault. But I never thought Cam Ward had the talent to be a true top of the draft quarterback that can elevate a franchise. I didn't think that before they drafted him. And I didn't see anything last year and haven't seen anything so far that makes me think that's any different. Again, ESPN and Matt Miller wrote the story. So, I mean, given what the fuck's happened to Matt Miller, it's kind of hard to be like the Matt Miller story. But Matt Miller wrote a story in which he talked to, allegedly, I want to make sure we say allegedly, because with Matt Miller, you never know if he's telling the truth. But Matt Miller talked to league executives and scouts and had them size up where Cam was as a prospect coming out. And he had him as a lesser prospect than Zach Wilson, a lesser prospect than Mac Jones. And Mac Jones was the 15th pick in the draft. Justin Fields was valued as a higher prospect. Anthony Richardson, Trey Lance were all viewed as better prospects by these scouts, according to Matt Miller, than Cam was. I haven't seen anything from Cam that makes me think it's any different. And Sharm kept saying, well, but you don't know that. You have to give him until year 2. So I want to be very, very clear with everybody out there in Titanland when it comes to my feelings about Cam Ward. And again, me saying, hey, I think Cam's going to be a bust. I want to be very clear about the Jared Stillman, Cam Ward bust declaration. Think of it as me placing my bet. And I am standing on the table and I believe in that bet. I do not think it's time to cash the bet yet. But I am willing to tell you I'm making this bet. I think he's going to be a bust. I'm a Titan fan. I hope it doesn't happen. But it has not been determined that he's a bust, and I'm not claiming that it's been determined that he's a bust. I'm not saying play Mitch Trubisky or Will Levis. I'm just telling you, I think he's going to be a bust. And Sharm today was talking about, well, you have media access. You can watch practice. You can ask questions. Is there any way that you could, just tell us what happens at practice? And I'm like, well, don't I do that? When Cam Ward couldn't hit the broadside of a barn at OTAs, didn't I tell you guys that? When Carnell Tate went out there, a guy that I didn't want them to draft with the 4th overall pick. But when Carnell Tate went out there and he started catching the football like he had a first baseman's mitt on his hand, didn't I tell you that? I told you guys about the route he ran the other day on that comeback where he put his foot in the ground, turned around, and he dusted that DB. I tell you what happens at practice. I mean, I ask questions at the press conferences that I think answer questions of topics that I'm going to have. Sometimes I will ask a question just so that I can say I asked it, so that you people that are doing the same bitching now about my press conference questions won't say, you'd never say that to Cam's face. You'd never say that to Robert Saleh's face, which I absolutely would. Guys, if I would say it to Mike Vrabel's face, why wouldn't I say it to anybody else's? So I have to ask, you still Billies, the 7,000 of you that have subscribed to this program over the last year, you still Billies, what do you want out of me? And I think what I've determined is it's this affirmation versus information thing. Some people want information. Some people want to be informed. Some people just want to hear what they believe. And that's information versus affirmation. When I was in Louisville, I was on the radio. We partnered with the university for a station. They called it 93.9 The Ville. And the University of Louisville was partnering, even though at the time we didn't have the rights to the games, which made the whole thing all kind of crazy. But the radio station, which is a company, Union Broadcasting, owned out of Kansas City, I love those people. Mwah. And the University of Louisville, where I went to school, loved those people too. They were forming a partnership. And I said, guys, I don't think this is a good idea. And the bosses in Kansas City said, well, what do you mean you don't think it's a good idea? And I'm like, if we go into business with these people, they're going to think they own us. They're going to want Fanboy Radio. No. They say they don't want Fanboy Radio. They say they just want you to tell it how it is. They just want a partnership. I said, it's not going to work like that. And guess what? That's what happened. People over at the university, they'd call up. So why'd you say the offensive line wasn't very good? I don't know. They gave up 9 sacks. They want affirmation. They don't want information. I think Matt Jones, the host of Kentucky Sports Radio, is one of the most talented broadcasters in America. I really believe that. I also think he's one of the most mischaracterized broadcasters in America. I hear people that talk about, well, he's a Kentucky fanboy and he's a homer and and in some cases he is. He was devastated the night that Kentucky hired Mark Pope as their basketball coach because they thought they were going to go get Jay Wright or Scott Drew. And then after a couple of days, he got on board and thought Mark Pope was the guy. But I think that Matt Jones is mischaracterized because people like Joe Rexrode see him wearing Kentucky gear at games, and they think he's some sort of homer that says whatever the Blues team does is good. And that's just not true. I listened to Matt Jones. And Matt Jones, he rips Kentucky's ass. Calipari at the end absolutely hated Matt Jones. Yeah, Matt Jones wants Kentucky to win. Yeah, Matt Jones roots for Kentucky. Yeah, Matt Jones used to always get on Louisville's. But he tells it like it is. And that's all I ask for, right? That's what I want to do. And I love the Titans. I do. But I don't want to ignore what's going on in Titan land just because it makes people feel better about the Titans to ignore it. I don't want to tell you when I'm sitting there looking at how to build a football team and I'm thinking, you know what they need to do? They need to sign Sam Darnold. They need to trade that draft pick. They need to build the team. They need to be competitive. And when they do see a quarterback in a draft that they love, make your move, get that guy, and develop them on a better team than that crap load of talent they had last year. That's what I think they should do. And when they don't do it, and the guy I wanted to go get wins the Super Bowl, and the guy they told me and you told me was better than that guy goes 3-14, yeah, I'm going to fucking talk about it. Shouldn't I talk about it? So again, I keep saying, what do you want? But I'm not sure that that's actually a question I'm asking. I think it's more so me telling, guys, if you don't want the truth, don't watch this show. Don't listen to this podcast. Don't follow me on social media. Don't anything. Because any non-talented bozo can just report whatever it is that the team wants the narrative to be. But that's not me. I'm a no bullshit kind of guy. And when I do get bullshit, I feel really, really bad about it. I still feel bad about the fact that I endorsed the University of Louisville, my university, when I was on the radio there hiring Bobby Petrino to come back as the football coach. And when we were getting humiliated in 2018 with fucking motorcycle Bobby Petrino on the sideline, I was doubly embarrassed because I put my hand in the air and I voted for that referendum. I have no problem admitting I'm wrong when I am wrong. But, I mean, again, listen to the cuts from Titans radio in the Netflix documentary. Things like, and the Titans know they have their quarterback. They know based on what? Like right now, and again, I saw this at practice yesterday. And TD put it in his notes. Cardinal Tate was wide open over the middle, low red zone. And I don't think Cam Ward's tall enough to see over the defensive line in the low red zone to see Cardinal Tate wide open coming underneath. So if I don't know if my quarterback is tall enough to be able to see receivers open in the end zone in the low red zone, I certainly am not convinced that I have my franchise quarterback. So I guess this is my way of saying, like, I'm not going to sit there and just tell you what you want to hear that's always good for the Titans. Yay! 104.5, God bless them, with the exception of Buck, they've turned into that. You know, back in the day, when it was Mark and Frank and Kevin, and then Withrow, Kaharski, and Hutton, and Clay Travis was doing afternoons on 3HL with Blaine and Brent, and the original 3HL. 3HL now kind of sucks, but the original 3HL, and I say kind of, it sucks. But the original 3HL, like with Clay Travis, that was must listen to radio. They were not pumping the Titans tires then. They were Titans radio, and Frank used to have some homerific takes, but they were not pumping the tires then. Now sometimes it feels like they do. If that's what you want, if you want benefit of the doubt, glass is not only half full, it's all the way full. If you want that, if you want Mike Borgonzi did a good job last year by not improving the team by a single game, but my eyeballs tell me that he did, then fine. There's plenty of that content out there. But I just can't do it. And when I go to press conferences, I go for two reasons. Number one, because there's questions of things that I know I'm going to talk about, and I might as well ask you about it if I'm going to talk about it. And number two, so that you can't hold over me, that I wouldn't say that to Cam's face. So what do you want? That's the first thing. The second thing, and I said yesterday on the program, that I am becoming a Robert Saleh fan. And what I mean by that is I don't know if he can coach, but I'm starting to like this Robert Saleh. He seems like a nice guy. He kind of reminds me, I don't know if you guys ever watched SWAT on CBS and Netflix, and I hate being the guy that brings up a TV show, but he reminds me of the SWAT commander Shamar Moore's character, Hondo. Kind of reminds me of Hondo. And I think Lindsay Hislop, who agreed to marry me on Sunday, might be in love with Robert Saleh. He's starting to like this Robert Saleh. But I am worried about the fact that he was 20-36 as a head coach of the New York Jets. And I am worried that he may not be a good coach because, again, how do we know if he can coach? And this morning on WFAN in New York, they were talking about the Fireman Ed comments that Saleh made yesterday after I asked him what Fireman Ed said, and some of you people on social media got all pissed off. And Greg Giannotti, the host of Boomer and Geo, just went off on Robert Saleh this morning. Here's what he said. Take a listen.
I just don't understand why people think he's going to be a good head coach.
Yeah, I don't.
I mean, I understand that the stink of the Jets is a thing, and when people leave the Jets, they seem to get better. But this guy was in over his head, and he came across as not a very bright person. Wow. It's true. I mean, I felt like he just didn't have the intellect to really run the team in the way that he needed to. I mean, he just did really stupid things, said really stupid things, was texting with Joe Beningo.
Yeah.
Like, how stupid do you have to be to
the whole
text?
thing with the house he was building?
Just did a lot of dumb things.
I don't know.
And then all of a sudden, he's now going to become
a genius.
Tom Landry because he left the Jets?
Maybe.
But he's got an offensive coordinator who also failed epically here in New York.
Sure did.
Who's going to be great. I mean, I want that team to go right down the toilet.
Okay, that was this morning on WFAN. And again, I laugh out loud at the entire he didn't come across as a very bright person. He did stupid things when he was the coach. He said stupid things when he was the coach. Think about it like this. Because I was kind of like, I mean, I don't think Robert Saleh's stupid. You know, I've talked to Robert Saleh maybe 2 times in my life. I've talked to a lot of people that know Robert Saleh. I really haven't had anybody tell me that they think Robert Saleh is stupid, but you never know. If Brian Callahan got a head coaching job, and stranger things have happened, though it would be very hard for me to imagine Brian Callahan ever getting another head coaching job. But if Brian Callahan got another head coaching job in the NFL, wouldn't we be saying the exact same things about how when Brian Callahan was the head coach of the Titans, he did a lot of stupid things. And when he was the head coach of the Titans, he said a lot of stupid things. And I'm not sure I would be rooting for Callahan to lose because I think Callahan's a good dude. But the idea that people have made, especially around here about Saleh, as if everything bad that happened with the Jets had nothing to do with Saleh, I think is a little overstated. When I hear Greg Giannotti talk about everything he did was stupid, it scares me. It makes me nervous. It makes me think that there may be some truth to that, and I don't like that. And so I'm absolutely going to be more attuned to some of the things that Robert Saleh says. Again, I'm starting to like Robert Saleh, but let's not kid ourselves. Robert Saleh has already said one thing this week that I'm like, what? Take a look.
And, I've always said that confidence is always projected in the volume of your voice. And, by the end of training camp, I hope we're loud as shit. That just tells you that we're confident and we know what we're doing. So the objective is to teach the best we can, to educate the best we can. And the challenge for our players is to absorb the information the best they can and build a confidence that gets them ready for week 1.
Even Mike Borgonzi laughed in that. And again, I heard that on Monday, and I thought to myself, what does that even mean? That confidence is measured in how loud your voice is? I think if I was there, I would have raised my hand and said, hey, Bobby, I'm pretty loud. Kaharski's loud as shit. And do we think Kaharski's confident in what he does? I think sometimes Kaharski's confident in what he does, but I wouldn't say all the time. So I hope he's not dumb, like Greg Giannotti says. I hope he doesn't just do stupid things as the head coach, but I am worried about that. And I brought this up yesterday because I've heard this a lot, and I think I want to know, when push comes to shove on this football team, can Robert Saleh put his foot down and say, I'm the head coach? We know the last guy couldn't. We know the guy before him probably did that a little too much. I think people respect Robert Saleh. I think they like Robert Saleh, but they need to know that they work for Robert Saleh. Whether you're one of the players or whether you're one of the coaches. I heard Cam the other day talk about how the rookies learned last year that they need to do things that got them to the NFL. And that the coaches are putting them in position to do things that got them to the NFL. And we played the cut last week of Cam talking about how Brian Dable asks him what he wants to do and how, the players need to run. That's great. But when it comes to Cam going over to the sideline and trying to tell Robert Saleh what to do, the way he told Brian Callahan what to do in the Denver game, the way he threw that fit, and then publicly in the press conference disagreed with Mike McCoy, I need to see Robert Saleh shut that shit down before it even becomes public. And so that's what I'm going to be keeping an eye on. But if this was Homer talk, I would just say something like, well, in New York, they are so reckless and they are so mean, and this is a much better place, and this is a much, but I'm not going to say that. What I'm going to say is, I worry he might be right, and I hope he's wrong. I hope he's wrong. I don't know that he's wrong. He's been doing mornings in New York for years. He would know more about Robert Saleh than I would. But when he says he's not a very bright person and he said stupid things and he did stupid things, that makes me nervous. And then again, like I said, I thought what Robert Saleh said on Monday about confidence in the loudness of your voice. Again, I still what does that even mean? Oh, man, but I do like Robert Saleh. I'm rooting for Robert Saleh, and I hope things go well for Robert Saleh. And, again, if I had to bet, I just think the organization's so fucked that I would bet against him. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because I like the guy. And not only that, as I say that I like the guy, I don't really know the guy, but I like what I know of the guy. Can I just say, it's okay for me to like him. And it's okay for me to tell you that I like him. But you know what I'm never going to like Robert Saleh more than? I'm never going to like him more than I like the Titans. I love the Titans. So if he's coaching the team and I think he's doing a shit job, well, I love the Titans more than I love Robert Saleh, so I'm going to call it how I see it. But I do hope he does well. I do want to get to this. And I've been debating in my head a little bit over, I don't know, the last couple of hours, how I wanted to talk about this. So 1 year ago today, I got a text message around, 10 a.m. being like, hey, can you come into the office of my employer at 1025 at the time? And I said, sure. And I went into the office and I just kind of had this feeling. I told Lindsay, I was like, I don't think this is going to go well. And I talked about it on the first show that I did here, in which I said, hey, we have been negotiating a new contract for months. I had been working without a contract since December of that year. It was July. They had gone from, we want to get a deal done to, it's going to be tough to get a deal done to, I don't know if we're going to get a deal done to me walking in the office and them saying, well, we think you're going to go somewhere else. And we're really excited about our new lineup. And I was like, so what's your new lineup? And they wouldn't tell me. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I found out it was Jake, and I like Jake. I like Jake. He's a good kid. But again, Jake and me, it's not really the same. And that's when I was like, okay, yeah, it felt like they were going on the cheap. And so if you want to call that fired, you can call it fired. I don't give a shit. The way I looked at it was, if I hadn't said anything to them, if I had been like, yeah, I'm good with this current as is, again, they have their own reasons. And what they said to me when the old man came in and we talked about it, they were basically like, we think that you've outgrown this place, which kind of seems like bullshit, but whatever. And when it went down last year, I thought that I was going to be upset, but I really wasn't. I went over to my parents' house. Lindsay was flying to Calgary that day. And I went over to my parents' house with my son, and I basically told my mom, hey, I need you to watch Jack because my phone is about to start exploding. And it did. And my feeling that day was almost relief. Not relief that my 10-year radio career with 1025 was over, but almost relief that instead of, hey, are they ever going to pay me what I think I'm worth? Are they ever going to treat me the way that I feel like I should be treated, what I feel like I've accomplished? I know the answer. And the answer was no. And that day, Caroline Fenton said to me, she goes, you may feel like your identity is in that station, but the truth is the identity of the radio station is you. And I thought, no, that's nice. You know, that would be nice if it's true. I don't know if it is, but let's see where this goes. And since then, and it wasn't as if I had this grand plan of if I don't get a new contract with the station, I'm going to leave and start a podcast with Braden, and I hadn't really thought about that. And I hadn't really thought about it, even though I had prepared for a very tense negotiation and I had saved up money in case it didn't work out. I didn't want to put my family out on the poorhouse or anything like that. But I didn't think about it because Mike Vrabel once said, and this has stuck with me, if you worry about the job that you don't have, you won't do the job that you do have. And I think there's a lot of truth there. We've all worked with people that are ladder climbers, and they're more worried about climbing the ladder and who they should be spending time with and what they should be doing than the actual job that they're tasked with every day. And so I wasn't really like that. So I didn't know what I was going to do the next day. And what was tough was I was on Sirius XM pretty much every single day over the next month. So if I was ever going to have time to sit down and brainstorm and go, I didn't have it because I was working Sirius XM. And so I think about what's happened since then and the fact that we've got 7,000 subscribers now to our YouTube page. I never had 7,000 subscribers on YouTube, even when I was on YouTube for 4 hours a day with the radio station. And YouTube was important to me. I mean, I wanted because the way I looked at it, when we hired David Reed to produce the afternoon show when Ian moved to mornings, I remember sitting there and saying in this kind of group discussion, I said, guys, I don't care about the signal, and I don't care about the signal strength, and I don't care about the fact that 104.5 has the Titans and we don't have the Titans. And I said, look, we cannot beat 104.5 from a money standpoint or a signal standpoint or a connection to the Titan standpoint. Bucs out there at practice every day doing his show. He's going to get the best guests because they pay the Titans over $1 million a year to air the games. But what we can do is we can out-digital them. And everybody there was like, yeah. But then nobody wants to do it. When it actually comes time to saying, hey, let's up our YouTube, nah. And now we have 7,000 subscribers. And back to Caroline's point about the identity of the station and me and everything else. When Robert Saleh got hired, it was the Monday night of the national championship game. I hopped up out of the bed and I say, you know what? I'm going to go live. And I'm going to go live so that tomorrow morning, when everybody wakes up, there's going to be a video on YouTube. There's going to be takes on Twitter. There's going to be TikToks. There's going to be a podcast. There's going to be, so instead of, I have to wait until 2:00 to hear what Jared says about this breaking news, people can just click it, access it, and go. Our breaking news coverage on this platform got 26,000 views. If you are looking at the stream on YouTube right now, I've got it up in front. Breaking, Titans hire Robert Saleh emergency reaction, 26,000 views. And right beneath it, I have 1025 the game's reaction to Robert Saleh, the breaking news, 676 views. A difference of roughly 25,400 views. And that was when I was like, you know what? I don't need them. And I'm going to tell you, like, I have a lot of respect for a lot of the teammates that I had there, both on the air and off the air. But I don't miss doing that show. I miss Ian. I miss Caroline. I miss arguing with Joe Rexroad every week. I miss Robbie, Derek, Adam, Willie. But I don't miss working with a program director who can't host a show for shit, or a general manager who never should have been promoted into that role, who can't even throw a Christmas party right. And I'm glad to no longer be at a place where there's no big picture projection of what's next. For years, we talked about what's going to happen. What's going to happen if we ever beat the zone? What's going to happen when we get ratings? And we used to talk amongst ourselves like, oh, yeah, when we get ratings and they'll sell the ads and this will make this, it will. I got to number one, which, again, with that signal should be impossible. That's like the old Vanderbilt back in the days. That's like Vanderbilt going to LSU and beating LSU. If I'm on par or beating 104.5 with their signal, and the fact that they have the Titans, and the fact that for some reason people are like, well, I just have always listened to 104.5, so I listen to 104.5 now. If I'm tied with them, I'm beating them, I'm up there with them on that signal, something crazy has happened. And it did. And you want to know how the radio station celebrated that? We had chicken fingers. That's right. We had an event. All the sales team, all the hosts, everybody got together at a restaurant. There was an advertiser of the station, so they were probably getting those chicken tenders for free. And we had chicken tenders. That's it. Not, hey, we're negotiating a new contract. We had great ratings in both the spring of 24 and the fall of 24. What do we, what's next on the contract? And no. Chicken fingers. By the way, not that people know this because radio ratings are kind of proprietary. You have to subscribe to Nielsen in order to get them. And whatever public ratings you see, those are not like the demographic that matters. So when people will pull up like, oh, I just Googled the radio ratings and this has a 0.3 or what, that doesn't matter. That's people 6+. That's like little girls going to school and old 80-year-old women. The only thing that matters in sports radio is men 25-54. That's it. That is the demographic. Men 25-54. That's it. And I'm not supposed to know this, but I got sources. And I'll just say this. With me in football season of 2024 and without me in the football season of 2025, those Nielsen ratings say they were down 75%. You heard that right. 75%. So, again, to the guys that are there, I wish them the best. And I loved working with them, and I loved the way that we busted each other's balls. I really do. There are some good people that are at that radio station, people in sales, people in management. There are good people there. But at the same time, well, we have 7,000 subscribers, and I think they have something over 2,000, maybe. So congratulations to us, because this is just the beginning. Like and I talked about this with the Vrabel and Rossini thing, and we ended up in Us Weekly, And I'm going around the country doing radio interviews and podcasts and all kinds of shit. And I don't know where this is going next. I don't know. I mean, I could tell you, I want to be the Josh Pate talking NFL. I want to, I don't know. I just felt like, you know what? The way I felt when I started this show a year ago was, I know I have a loyal audience. Let's tell that loyal audience, hey, instead of using the radio to get the Stillman program talking about the Titans and everything else, just go to a podcast on your phone in your car. Just go to YouTube. And I think for us, it's worked out. And it's crazy, just crazy how much changes in a year. And yet, at the end, I was worried. I really was. That that my voice was going to be lost. That if I'm not on the radio, I'm not going to matter. And maybe this is self-serving, or maybe, I'm a narcissist. I don't know. But as a performer, as an artist, I believe the goal is to do work that people enjoy. That's why you see a lot of people like Jerry Seinfeld say, I'm not going to just do Seinfeld to make money when I've already got enough money in the bank and it's going to be a shit show. Like what The Simpsons have turned into, Jerry Seinfeld wasn't going to do that. And so as an artist, I want people to hear what I have to say. I mean, that's probably the favorite part that I've had about this job, is that when I'm mad at the Titans because they did something I don't agree with or I think stupid, they hear it. That doesn't mean that they'll act on it, but they'll hear it. And I was worried, if I'm not on the radio, are people still going to hear what I'm saying? And considering that, again, a big storyline of training camp through the first 2 days has been about press conference questions asked by me, the fact that the whole offseason discourse of Cam Ward inaccurate at OTAs, is he a bust, came from this program, I feel like we're doing a pretty good job. And I also feel like this is where this is all headed. I think, I forget where I heard this, but I heard some advertisement or some email or some whatever that said 87% of Americans use terrestrial AM, FM radio every day, which is down from the 94% that we used to always be told all the time when I worked in radio. I'll just say this. There was a focus group in which they brought college kids in, not at the station, somewhere else. Not going to tell you where. A focus group, 2 focus groups of panels where they brought in college kids. And they asked the college kids, okay, so do you guys listen to the radio? Not a single one across 2 panels said yes. We are living in what's called the clip economy, which means that I can do just as much in 1 hour as I was doing in 4 hours. We can get it cut up, and there's all this different AI software out there to cut it up and put it out there, and you can get 1 million views on a tweet. And that, or a TikTok, or whatever, YouTube, and 1 million people viewing one thing is infinitely more important than somebody just sitting in their car listening on the radio for 4 hours. I love that I can go live whenever I need to. I love the fact that, hey, if practice runs late, I'm not going to be rushing to get home because at 2 o'clock I got to be on. And quite frankly, it's given me more time with my kid. I get to pick my kid up from school. If I was on until 6 o'clock every day, I wouldn't be able to pick my kid up from school. And I don't have to go down to the arena every time the Preds host a weekday game. I don't have to rely on bullshit internet to try to get the video and audio out and make sure it sounds good and we don't drop and anything else. I got to say, I kind of enjoy it. Jordan said, Jared is acting like a guy who can't get over his ex-girlfriend. I don't know about that. First of all, I did just get engaged. But secondly, and I feel pretty good about this, I am kind of, again, I miss the team, but I don't miss doing 4 hours of radio every day and putting on that performance and not being able to say shit sometimes that I wanted to say and not having engineers. And I am not missing that. But again, this was a year ago. 1 year ago today. And now we have 7,000 subscribers, thanks in large part to most of you. Okay, I do want to hit on some other NFL topics. The first, Baker Mayfield. Speaking of contracts and speaking of being pissed off, Baker Mayfield is pissed off that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have not given Baker a new contract. Baker is in the final year of a 3-year deal that he signed after he made good on his 1-year prove-it deal with Tampa Bay, and Baker is underpaid. Baker makes about $33 million a year, and Baker wants to be in the $50 million range, and the most the Bucs are going to offer is $2 million. Or excuse me, is 2 years, and they will not get into the $50 million territory with Baker that Baker believes he belongs in. Can I just say this? I was a little surprised that Baker went to the press conference yesterday and laid out there his disappointment with the Bucs, his anger with the Buccaneers, in order to say that I want a new contract and I'm not getting it. But then again, this is Baker Mayfield. This has kind of always been who Baker Mayfield is. Baker Mayfield has always had a chip on his shoulder. And when other people would say, hey, man, let it go. You know, it's beneath you. Don't go there. Don't address it. Don't. That Baker can't do that. That's not who he is. But I do see both sides of this argument. And I see Tampa Bay's side, which looks at Baker and says, Baker's good, but is Baker great? And then I see Baker Mayfield's side of this. Jalen Hurts makes north of $50 million. Justin Herbert makes north of $50 million. Again, Baker's making 33. Kyler Murray was making 46 in Arizona. Tua is going to be making $50 million this year from the Miami Dolphins to play for the Falcons. When we talk about $30 million or $40 million, yeah, that's a lot of money to us, but that's not a lot of money for a quarterback. The new money on Patrick Mahomes' new contract comes out to $119 million a year. So I get where Baker is looking at himself, looking at the league and saying, wait a minute. I'm definitely in that same stratosphere with Trevor Lawrence and Dak Prescott. And Dak Prescott makes $60 million, and Trevor Lawrence makes $55. And Baker absolutely is worth $50 million a year for what he's doing at the quarterback position. But I also see Tampa Bay's side of this. Tampa Bay had Jameis Winston, and Jameis Winston was doing well enough. But push came to shove with Jameis, and it was time to pay Jameis. And Tom Brady was available. And they signed Tom Brady. And they won the Super Bowl, and they probably should have won a second one. And then that third year, they weren't very good, and Brady retired, and they went out and they got Baker. And if you're Jason Light, do you think you're a Super Bowl contender? Maybe a couple of years ago, when you were in the divisional round of the playoffs, you could argue you were a Super Bowl contender. Mike Evans at wide receiver still. But last year, they didn't even make the playoffs. Mike Evans is gone. Vita Vea wants a new deal. He'll probably at some point be gone. And so, at the end of the day, I think Tampa Bay looks at Baker and they say, Baker, we're just not willing to do this. And you probably can get that on the open market, but they have the franchise tag. So here's my advice to everybody involved. Baker, go do your thing this year. I think Baker, at the beginning of last year, when he went on the road to Houston with backup tackles and beat the Texans, I was like, that guy's a franchise quarterback. Now, Baker didn't finish the year that way, but I'll say this, Baker Mayfield, fuck them. You go do your thing. And if you go do your thing, they'll franchise tag you. And if they franchise tag you, you will make the average of the top 5 at the quarterback position, which will be well into the $50 million range. And then they'll probably want to sign you to a contract because they'll know that you're their franchise quarterback. And my message for the Bucs is, if you don't think Baker is irreplaceable, and considering how easy it was for you to get Baker, go ahead. But just know that if Baker does prove to be irreplaceable, you're going to have to tag him. And if I'm Baker and you want to come back to the table, you're going to have to pay me top of the market money. Because I will guarantee you this. If Baker has a year similar to what he's done so far in Tampa Bay through the first 3 this upcoming season, there will be a team that right now thinks they have their quarterback and a young guy who ends up not making it, who will pay out the ass for Baker Mayfield. There will be a team, whether it is Atlanta, if they give up on Tua and Michael Penix after a down year this year, Miami, if Malik Willis isn't that guy, New York with Jackson Dart, the Jets, who God knows who their quarterback is ultimately going to be, there will be a team that will pay Baker. And you don't get a hometown discount. So I'm all for that. I see both sides of it. I get it. Personally, I think I'd extend Baker if I was Tampa Bay. I think I'd be willing to go into the 50s, extend Baker, and say, hey, we're going to build this thing around Baker. What we're going to do is we're going to pretend that instead of Jameis, we drafted Baker number 1, and Baker's our guy. Because I'm just not sure that the alternative to Baker is that much better. And Baker is in his prime. So you can extend him for a couple of years, and he's not going to turn into an old pawpaw on you. The second thing in this little lightning round here. So Awful Announcing had a note that I haven't been watching First Take this week, but apparently ESPN's First Take has debated the Dallas Cowboys Super Bowl chances every single day this week. So on Monday at some point they talked about, can the Cowboys win the Super Bowl? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I guess today they've talked on ESPN on their flagship show First Take, can the Dallas Cowboys win the Super Bowl? And I have to say, I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like First Take, and I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like Stephen A. Smith, and I get it. I'm a coworker with Stephen A. I like Stephen A. But the reason they're talking about whether or not the Cowboys are Super Bowl contenders is because they're just playing the hit. The Cowboys are the most popular and also the most infamous team in the NFL. People have strong feelings about the Cowboys. Even if they don't like the Cowboys, they have strong feelings about the Cowboys. Here's the only problem I have with debating the Dallas Cowboys Super Bowl chances every day. It's not that I don't get it. It's not that I wouldn't get into the debate, because if I was in the debate, I would just say, no, the Dallas Cowboys aren't going to compete for the Super Bowl this year. I'm sorry. But I do have to say, there is something about the Cowboys that I just ask, what makes you think they're going to compete for the Super Bowl? Dallas is in this group of teams that I just can't, I cannot have a reasonable conversation about them going on the road to SoFi and beating the Rams with Aaron Donald and Myles Garrett and saying, yeah, that's going to happen. Now, Detroit didn't make the playoffs last year, and I think Detroit's going to have a bounce back year, and Detroit's going to be good. And so okay. There are teams that I don't think can win the Super Bowl, but we could have the discussion. Chicago, Green Bay. We can do that. But then there are other teams. Indianapolis. Trying to think in the, I don't think the Chargers can win the Super Bowl. I'll throw them in there. The Chargers. That I'm just like, come on now. Even Baker and Tampa Bay, they're not going to compete for the Super Bowl. And Dallas is in the same level, I think, as those teams are. So I get why they're doing it. And Dallas Cowboy fans are like UT Vol fans. They think they're going to win every game the next season, and no matter how bad the last season was. But let's not kid ourselves. The Dallas Cowboys are not Super Bowl contenders. The fact that they're having a discussion about that every day just makes me laugh my ass off. And finally, CBS has suspended NFL game analyst, #1 analyst, Tony Romo. Tony Romo was cited for operating while intoxicated last week in Wisconsin. Apparently there was allegedly an open alcohol container in the car. Romo was leaving the golf course, said he was on the way to grandma and grandpa's house, and so on and so forth. And let me just say, I find this whole situation to be fascinating. J.J. Watt is going to take over for Tony Romo on the #1 team. And according to Andrew Marchand of The Athletic, CBS will announce the broadcast pairings for the rest of the crews later in the summer, which is very, very odd. But this is a very odd situation. I don't know if Tony Romo's suspension is the beginning to a firing or not. I would assume in Tony Romo's massive contract, where I think he still has something like $70 million left on it, I would assume there is some sort of for cause clause in that contract saying if Tony does what O.J. Simpson was alleged of doing when he was on NBC, we can get out from the contract. And DUI is a gray area in all of this. If you get charged with murder, again, like OJ, like Aaron Hernandez, you're done. At that point, everybody has to cut ties with you. It's over. If you have something that is very embarrassing, but, a warrant out for your arrest because you didn't show up to court on a speeding ticket, unpaid child support, things like that, you're not going to get fired over unpaid child support. It's embarrassing, but it's not really a fireable offense. And then right there in the middle is DUI. And I don't know about you, but I think we all know people who have gotten DUIs. And so I know a DUI does not mean you're a bad person. I remember when Todd Downing got his DUI. And when it came to whether or not the Titans were going to fire Todd Downing over getting the DUI, I kind of shrugged and I said, and then a coach you like gets a DUI, do you have to fire him? And actually what I think's going to happen here is I think this DUI gives CBS the ability to get out of the Tony Romo contract. The question is, does CBS want to get out of the Tony Romo contract? And I don't know the answer. I, for one, thought Tony Romo, when he called out the plays during that AFC Championship game between the Patriots and the Chiefs, was the best in the business. And then, in the years that have ensued, I find Tony Romo to be very, very unexciting and not insightful. I don't know what happened to Tony. I mean, the game still played the same, so I don't know why he can't call out the plays like he used to at the beginning at CBS, but he doesn't do it. I don't think his commentary is very interesting, and I don't even think Jim Nantz likes working with him. But he still is a big name, and he did play for the Cowboys, and that does matter. But J.J. Watt's a big name. And I don't know, could they go get Greg Olsen next year from Fox? There's a part of me that thinks, you know what? CBS might just use this as a reason to get out from Tony Romo. If this was John Madden when CBS worked there, they'd say, we're aware of the situation, and might even say something in a statement stern like, we don't like it. But they would not have fired John Madden over this. So I think we're going to see how CBS feels about Romo. If they like Romo, they'll keep him. If they don't, they'll get rid of him and try to get out of the contract. Okay, let's get to your reaction. I promised I would leave time for that, so let's do it from the top. We're including everything that has been on the table so far. Kelsey says, more like the Sam Darnold wins a Super Bowl and is still underappreciated. Go check out the Sharm Sports podcast. I'll retweet it later in the day today. Go check out that podcast I did earlier today. because old buddy was like, Sam Darnold, he would have only won 5 games here last year. Yeah. How about the team that Sam left, Minnesota? How are they doing? By the way, Seattle didn't even make the playoffs the year before Sam showed up, and they won the Super Bowl. Give me a break. One person says, I agree with both of you. People don't like anything negative because positive isn't worth hearing. It's even funnier because he, talking about me, was 100% right about Darnold, and people will say he was carried. Jared, you keep being the brutally honest guy that we all need. You know, the one thing that bothers me about the public perception of my takes or my show or, you know, again, the work that I do is the amount of people that claim that my crazy off the wall takes are for show and that I don't actually believe them. And I don't really care when some Johnny Joe on Twitter thinks that. But when somebody who should know better or knows me accuses me of that, that pisses me off. I'll just tell you what I think. Again, Carnell Tate, I didn't want to draft him. I thought Carnell Tate's 40 time was disqualifying. I watch Carnell Tate now. I'm like, that dude is a bad boy. Like, I do see a little JSN in Carnell Tate. Cedric says, all the questions you asked at the press conference were valid. I don't know why everyone just started shitting bricks on Twitter. I mean, it's almost like I think sometimes these people, they want to be like, fuck Jared Stillman. You know, they hear my voice in a press conference and they hear me ask a question about Fireman Ed and they're like, oh, I get to be mad at Jared today. I felt like the Preds fans were like that for the longest time. And now the Preds have just been kind of like off in no man's land, so it's not the same. But I felt like they used to be that way, where they couldn't wait to shit on something that I said or did. One person says, we don't need all that sunshine pumping 24/7. I think that the 7,000 people that watch this show or subscribe to this show or everything else I think that they don't need the sunshine pumping. I think you guys are information seekers. I think it's part information seeking, part hate watching. But I think that this group, I mean, that's the core group that came over. I think that's what you guys want. And then there's RJ, who I love with all my heart. But RJ, man, go look at his Twitter. The Titans are going to win the Super Bowl this year. The Vols are going to win the national title. And anybody who says otherwise is just a hater. I mean, to me, it kind of is what it is. One person says, Saleh's comments on the loudness of your voice projecting confidence is a pretty intellectual take. I disagree. I think there are plenty of loud people that are covering for an insecurity, and being insecure is the opposite of confident. Now, I think you can be confident and also be loud, but I don't think that being loud makes you confident, if that makes any sense. Kyle says, Jared, what do you think about Bucs' comment on this year's Titans offensive line being the worst he's seen since he's been in Nashville? I think it's crazy. I saw that on Twitter too, where Buck said he thinks this might be the worst offensive line that they've ever had since he's been covering the team over the last 11 years, which would be fine because the gold standard for terrible offensive line play was that 2015 Wisenhunt team, but I think that was the year before Buck got here. I don't know how it could be worse than 2024. I mean, J.C. Latham is probably not worth the 7th overall pick, and I'm not even sure if J.C. Latham's going to be a good right tackle, but he's better than P.T. And again, Andre Dillard, and I know Aaron Brewer has somehow turned things around according to PFF, but Aaron Brewer fucking sucked too. That offensive line they had in 23 was god-awful. And 24, I didn't think the line was that bad last year. I mean, I didn't think it was good, but I didn't think it was that bad. I also think you're going to see more sack totals and a worse offensive line when you're in 3rd and long and it's a predictable down so the defense can pin their ears back and come after the quarterback than it would be if you were a team that was running the football effectively and playing the way that they used to play. I don't think this is going to be the worst offensive line. I mean, this team has a starting left tackle, even though he's an average starting left tackle. They have a starting left tackle, a starting left guard, and a starting right tackle. Now, I think they do need more at center. I think, right guard is a huge question mark. I think you can kind of fudge it at right guard and be okay. But, again, it's called the right tackle story. It's not called the right guard story. Though I will say, the old man, he'd want you to have a guard and a center, but not as much as you need to have a right tackle. One person says, Jared, you struck a nerve with the Cam boys on YouTube. There's a couple that love taking shots at you just because of the Cam Ward delusion. I know, but those were the same people that were out there saying, let Rand cook. Jared Stillman, you don't know more than Rand Carthon, and Bill Callahan thinks that J.C. Latham can play left tackle. What do you know? And I'm like, okay. That's those people. The people that called Brian Callahan Callie, those people, they always pump sunshine. And then they play musical blame. So they're the people that think Mike Borgonzi's doing a good job, even though through 1 year, Mike Borgonzi didn't win one more game than Rand Carthon had won the year before. That's not improving the club. You have an entire offseason, you have the number 1 pick in the draft, and you don't improve by a single fucking game? And I remember, too, because both Nick Suss and Easton Freeze brought that bullshit of, well, they said it was going to be a tough process. And I'm like, yeah. As in, we're going to win 6 games and still not be very good. We're not going to win a single game more and fire the coach. But that's their business, not mine. One person says, would you ever have PK and Buck on the show? Do you think they'd want to? Well, I've done shows with PK. And to be honest, when PK and I do the show, it is not as much of a debate show as even I thought it probably would be with me and PK, though we do disagree about stuff and argue and whatever. When PK and I, when Braden's out and I fill in and we do a football show, it feels to me, and this is just me, maybe you have a different opinion on this, it feels to me like PK and I are kind of doing a Titans version of PTI, with Wilbon and Kornheiser, 2 old grumps up there kind of saying whatever, but not, jumping all over each other or whatever. And I like that. I think PK and I do a good job. With Buck, I don't know. Sometimes, and I've said this about Buck, and I've said this to Buck's face, so I can say it on here. Sometimes I think Buck is a bigger Buck fan than he is a sports fan. And I think if Buck were to come on the show, Buck would look at that as like, oh, man, I'm going to get killed by the people on Twitter, and that's not going to be good for the Buck fandom. But I do love Buck. But I don't know. I'm not sure, whatever. Now, I am going to knock this one right here, where this one person says they don't even have pads on. Buck's kind of stupid. Well, I remember walking out of the 3rd practice in 2023 and calling my dad and saying, this offensive line is fucking terrible. And they hadn't even put the pads on then either. And you could just tell. Or I say you could, but nobody else wanted to tell. I could just tell. And Vrabel tried to do the whole, oh, no, putting the pads on. No. And I just, make of that what you will. I'm not going to say that Buck's wrong because they haven't put the pads on yet. I think that's a soft-ass excuse. Same guy says, I think Darnold is not that good. He choked pretty hard versus the Lions in that one playoff. Well, that was just a regular season game, and he didn't play very well. I don't know, man. I'd say the fact that in the NFC title game, Sam Darnold against the best team in the NFL, other than his own team, threw for 364 and 3 touchdowns, I'd say he's pretty good. I mean, I love Sam Darnold. You all know that. I did not think Sam Darnold was going to win the Super Bowl. And I don't think Sam would have won the Super Bowl last year for the Titans, but I don't think they would have won 3 games with Sam Darnold as their quarterback either. Okay, there's a practice tomorrow. Then the Titans are off Sunday. Then the pads go on Monday. And, of course, we will be right here. 2 o'clock Monday. Like and subscribe. Again, thank you to all of you that told your friends, that organically grew this program, that shared our stuff, that retweeted, whatever. Thank you to every single one of you over the last year. that has us over 7,000 subscribers. Keep growing. Like and subscribe. Stillman and Company, presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical on the 440 Sports Network.